Welcome to Sumbits, where we decode the PowerSchool development experience. Sumbits is brought to you by MBA. Let's start the show.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sumbits. As always, joined by Eric Scheidel and Ryan Cockrum. For our viewers, you can see them on screen. For our listeners, we are joined by the one and only Peter Nethercott. We'll get to kind of your story here in a little bit, but of course, we always start the episode by figuring out what everybody's drinking today. I have another new bourbon for everyone. This is a Rebel 100 from Lux Row Distillery. It's a fairly cheap bottle, but it is another delicious one. Good value, especially for the proof. So if you get a chance to try it, let me know how you like it. What are you guys drinking today?
Well, I decided to go back to beer, and I decided to get 3 beers that I've never tasted before, just to try things out. And if I get to the other ones while we're recording, I'll bring them up. But the first one I'm starting with is Big Sexy Funk by the Strathcona Beer Company in very teensy tiny writing.
Isn't that a Justin Timberlake song? I'm kidding.
You would know.
If anybody would know, it'd be Sean.
Hey.
Not because of Timberlake, but because of your music knowledge.
But I do like this. And you've only got 4 seconds to save the world. 4 seconds. Anyways.
Is that what it said?
That's one of them.
I'm living vicariously through you fellas today. Due to a recent visit with the doc and some temporary meds, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, nothing serious, but I'm enjoying a Cherry Coke Zero today. So you guys need to enjoy your beverages a little extra for me today.
I'll have a sip
Jealous.
for you.
I'm sure they will. Being Friday night, it's usually beer night for me, but that's typically root beer because it's pizza night. But today, changed things up a little bit. Went with historically one of the oldest major products in this category from the United States. Started in Waco, Texas, and it is actually bottled by a lot of different companies, including Pepsi, Coke, and themselves. So I'm going with a Dr. Pepper.
Oh,
zero sugar.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I did some research on it, and it was an interesting background. Depending on where you are in the world, it's bottled by Pepsi or Coke, or in the United States by Keurig Dr. Pepper. And then they have little independent bottlers, so that there are even independent bottlers in the South that when they went to the high fructose corn sugar, some of the bottlers refused to do that, so they were still making it with sugar. So interesting. If you ever get a chance, look it up. It's got some fascinating stuff. But the awesome. Zero sugar one is new. Just came out in like April. So they had it in the UK for a few years, and it's not a whole lot different than the diet. But I found my son kind of got me hooked on Dr. Pepper, and I decided. Especially with COVID, I need to get rid of some pounds. So they have the best diet that I like. So that's the one I go with.
So if PowerSchool ever collapses, we can just open a Dr. Pepper bottling franchise. Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe. Yeah.
Hey,
The strange thing is
I'm just picturing I Love Lucy right now, like of all things going
on the conveyor belt.
Oh no, you're wrong. No. You're talking Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Laverne and Shirley, right?
Then that's probably it. Yes, I'm only going by some vague memory of a scene I've seen.
It was in Wayne's World, and all the bottles are going by, and they put the little glove on it, and they wave bye to the glove. Yes. It's Laverne and Shirley. And that was a beer bottling plant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where all the cool kids live.
Hence why you know that. That makes sense then.
Yeah, hence.
But I digress.
So today's topic, we're getting into September now, where everybody's getting back into school. So we wanted to kind of talk about some things in regards to the start of the school year. But before we get into that, Peter, for the people that don't know you, can't imagine there's too many people that don't know your name, but maybe a little background. How long you've been in PowerSchool, where you're at now, and kind of a little bit about your story.
Okay, so thank you. I've been in PowerSchool since about 2014. I came in, I have a background, sounds similar to Eric's, that I was actually trained in development. So when I got into the customization side of things, I kind of hit the ground running, and I had a strong background in databases and many other things. I've been developing software for 35 years now, more than that. So my first programming was done on an Apple II, which had a whopping 48K of memory. Yeah, and so, you had those little floppy disks that they had the little clipped area. If you clipped the other side and flipped it over, you got double the capacity. And it worked.
Yep.
Yeah.
The old
they couldn't guarantee the other
actual floppy disk.
Like the 5-inch
actual floppy disks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was floppy. So if you opened up the little ones they had and just progressed, it's interesting to have been a part of that history is pretty remarkable. So I was in the private industry for many, many years as a programmer. Took some time out from that to do quality assurance and testing because it wasn't being done. A lot of those places would put out software without testing, and it drove me crazy. And then eventually got back in the process of trying to get back into development, had to learn some new skills and such. And I finally wound up at Ken ISD. And I've really developed there. My title is actually data warehouse developer. I haven't touched our data warehouse since I started PowerSchool, basically.
So you did a good job.
Well, actually, the guy who was there before me was he's kind of one of those that he's like a programming savant. He's been called Keys since he was in third grade because he was a touch typist in third grade. So
Holy cow.
he knows his stuff. So, but anyway, when I started out at Ken ISD, we had you guys all know Dory Baldwin. She was our school administrator.
I used to work with her.
Yeah, and it was just her and an assistant. And when she retired from the military and retired from the school systems at the same time, it was taken over by another gentleman who was in the position for 2 years. But we added a preschool, Great Start program, a project-based school, and a virtual school all in the same year, and burned out our 2 people pretty fast. And we were already hosting like 6 PowerSchool instances for our local districts and such. So when he left, they realized they needed to make a team. So I'm very fortunate that in my position, I have a wonderful team I work with. They do most of the day-to-day stuff, and I get to concentrate on the customizations and the reporting and that kind of thing. And I found out I was a little bit leery when I first took the role, but I've loved it. And ever since my first PSUG actually was a national conference, and I met the group of people that called themselves the customizers. I told my wife when I left, I got to find a way to get back. I said, this is the long lost tribe I've been removed from. I need to get back. It was wonderful. I said, I don't care if they meet in Timbuktu. I want to get back and just be with this group. And so it's a great group to be with. And I think it was, I think Eric, you might have talked about it in the previous one where you had said that it's an interesting group of people in that we do this customization and this development, but we're not that person that wants to be locked in a closet to do it and not interact with anybody. We all have that part of us that craves that interaction. And I think in many cases, we have a teaching background or an education background in many ways. Like Ryan, I have a father I'm a 5th generation teacher, actually. So Fort Hays University in Kansas was actually founded by my ancestors. So, interesting fact though.
Generation, that's impressive as far as that's a long way back for teachers.
Yeah. Oh. Interestingly though, the school was actually run by my maternal ancestor. She was the one with the education, but everything at the time had to be in my paternal ancestor's name. So even though his name was on everything, she was the one that pretty much ran it. So we've also had women educated in my family for centuries. So it's an interesting position to be coming from. And like Ryan said, trust the secretaries and the maintenance staff. They're the ones that run everything. You got to be friends with them, because they do.
Absolutely.
You have administrators come and go, but your secretaries and your maintenance staff typically stay. So
Stick around, yeah.
It's true. So true.
So
They know all the ins and outs.
correct. So once I got in there, though, started working with PowerSchool. One of the first tasks they had us do is we had several different versions of having accommodations, special ed accommodations in PowerSchool visible at our districts. I think Dory had started that, and so one of my first tasks was to go in and make that I try to make it into a plugin. So I took all the best parts from the different ones, and that became one of my first plugins that I created that I then shared it out. And since then, we've kind of expanded that to do a lot of different things, including we're now to the point I worked with our special education department and developed a way to track what accommodations have been provided based on some information they wanted to be able to do for evaluating the efficacy of what they were providing. So that was a part of it as well. But once I started getting into it, and it was like so many people. I was new to PowerSchool. The file structures didn't make any sense, or at least very little. And just trying to wrap my head around it and started playing with it. And then I went to my PSU was about, the only one I went to was about 4 months after I started, 3-4 months after. And I remember sitting in on the table extension class, and they were saying, we're going to this relational database thing. First thought in my head was, why in the world is it not doing that now? That's the way it should have been done to begin with. And the second thing was, this is going to be a lot of panic for people.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first things I really concentrated on, trying to understand what legacy fields we had, how we were using them, where we were using them. And I started poking around in the background and looking at, I had access to the database and where things were stored. And I started developing these various reporting tools that I realized would be helpful for our districts as well if they decided they wanted to migrate. And when they did go ahead and do that, and it eventually became the plugin and reports that was the first one I ever shared in PowerSource, which was actually something that Jason Springle was on our campus presenting a deep dive on version 9. And somebody mentioned that I'd created it, and he said, would you be willing to share that on PowerSource? I said, okay, I know this is going to do some interesting things.
Well, that's some high praise, though.
Yeah, so I did, and then I talked to him. I had some questions for him. He said, those are actually questions that I can't answer for you. But he said the PowerSchool folks will sometimes come to the National Peace Hug. So that was my excuse, if you will, to go to Vegas to the national conference to see some of these people and get some of these questions answered. And I tell the story to a lot of people how when I was sitting in a lunch second or third day, I was chatting with the people at my table, and somebody looked at my name tag and said, "Oh, you're Peter Nethercott. You created that plugin." I thought, okay, wait a minute. This is weird.
What just happened?
I'm in Las Vegas. I just put this thing out there a couple months ago, and people already know my name. And I told my wife I wasn't sure I could walk out of the lunchroom because my head got so big.
Yeah. Well, at least you're honest.
Yeah. Another piece to that was the first person. That guy we don't mention, right? He had made a comment on it when it came out, right?
Awesome job.
But the first person that I communicated with after was thanks, was somebody that was having trouble with things working, and I went back and forth with him, and then I looked up their information, and I thought I reached out to him directly on a separate one. I said, "Are you in China?" And the guy said, "Yes." And that was like suddenly my whole concept of PowerSchool world just
Changed.
Boom.
Yeah,
it
Just
is.
how far it reaches. And I'd seen at the PSU probably a quarter of the attendees at the Chicago one I went to were from China.
Wow.
But I mean, it was just that going to that PSU, getting that exposure to the global nature of PowerSchool and seeing what the effect it had was actually, I think more valuable to me than probably anything I actually learned there otherwise. I did learn some valuable stuff, but I realized for me, since I'm not doing the day-to-day stuff, something like a PSUG was going to get me a lot more exposure to the types of things I needed to learn. So, but yeah, so that was that's kind of my introduction to PowerSchool and getting into that, and then I just hit the ground running, and I love it.
Well, I'm sure I can speak for a lot of people that we're very grateful that you've made that pass, because some of the stuff that you put out on PowerSource is definitely pretty awesome stuff.
Appreciate it.
I do want to quickly, just because the talk about all the people traveling all that way reminded me of a very interesting one, I thought. Same thing, though, idea. I remember one of the PSUs I was at, there was a woman from, I forget what country, but South America. And she detailed at our table at lunch at a PSU the connections and time it took her to make it all the way up to the PSU. And it was like over a day's worth of travel, like between, different jumps and connections and everything like that to make it from wherever she was in South America, including like I think there was also just even one like ridiculous like leg of travel. I can't remember what. I don't even want to try to remember and falsely remember it. But I just remember she said she spent more than a day in travel to get to this PSU. And I mean that's the international reach of this whole community.
I think it's very valuable, especially if you're first getting into PowerSchool too.
Absolutely.
To take that, because that introduction of what PowerSchool is supposed to do is really, really important. And then after that, for someone in my position, then I can say, okay, this is what we want it to do further. And so I was able to get that foundation and do that. And
I feel like anybody that is involved in PowerSchool finds themselves realizing at some point, there's that light switch that clicks, that when you realize how big PowerSchool actually is, and how many different parts and pieces to it there really are. So even through like implementation and all that training, you may sit there and go, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to use this. And then here you are a year later and you're going, okay, I kind of remember learning this, but I need to know more. And kind of routing that back to the topic for today, when we come back to and looking at start of year, that is such a hectic time of year. Where whether you're dealing with last minute scheduling, or even when the kids do start, schedule changes and all that fun stuff, registration pieces and all that, and making sure your data's good.
One of my pro tips on here is related to the schedule changes.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into. I know Ryan brought some notes, and unless somebody else wants to jump in, what we're kind of three of us kind of come from districts, so we kind of see what that start of year hecticness is. Eric, you see it from a different side, but I'm sure you notice it as well.
You dealt with the data.
Yeah, exactly. So, Ryan, what you got?
Well, I mean, my biggest pro tip, and I mean, I'm not going to I'll let the conversation go as it goes. My biggest pro tip, I feel like, as a former PowerSchool administrator at a district, is when kids, as they obviously all do at the beginning of the year, go through class changes, different sections, sit with their friends, don't get along with this person, whatever. Usually districts, schools don't count that as a dropped course. They count it as, they're just going to the different one altogether. There isn't even any marks, attendance, anything really associated with it. They just want to move it. When you drop a section and a CC record on the modify schedule screen, if you use the start date as the exit date, it purges the record altogether, as opposed to creating a dropped CC record. Because typically, at least in my district, you would create the new enrollment from the start date as if that kid was in that class all around, just leaving it all easier. Less, there's not another record to worry about. There's not mismatches. There's not another teacher looking at kids in this other list. So that's my biggest thing is if you're treating it as if that kid was never supposed to be there, or you never wanted them to be in there anymore, and there's no, of course, state or provincial reporting requirements that make it so that you need to have that 2-day enrollment reported. Make sure you exit them on the start date when you're choosing the date to exit them on, because it just erases the record it completely, like it never existed.
So when you enroll them in the new course, you just choose that original date as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can start it wherever you want it, but yeah.
So
just make sure it's after the start of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, not before. One little caveat I will say.
But okay, so I got to interject here because you guys laugh, but I have done some work with scheduling from a customization perspective, and some of the stuff that I see is just out there, and I don't know. Being, again, I probably said this a billion times during our podcast recordings, is I'm the guy that's never worked in a school district, but where the first day of school on your in your terms was maybe August 1st, but school actually started on August 27th, and what does that do to ADA, ADM, and all that kind of stuff? It's really interesting. You laugh and you say don't do this, but when it's just really interesting when I code these plugins that are mass distributed, going, all right, what is
people are doing that?
This one district gonna do? That's gonna throw a monkey wrench into this thing, and
I laugh because we've done it. We've had the situation where it was off by a day. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, when you do the scheduling in the spring, sometimes folks will put the schedule on there and not know what the start date is for the next year. And they'll put something that's close. Yeah, or it changes, right? And so you have to make sure, and that was the pro tip that I had on when I reached out to my team. What's the one thing that, is kind of been a bugaboo for us in the past? And that's it. That if it throws things off, if you don't have that start date at or after the beginning of the school, the term, the students in the class, everything can look fine. But as you pointed out, with some of the attendance issues and some of the other things, you're not seeing the right data in there. So you have to make sure that day, that start date, is on or after the start of the term.
No, are we talking about, I just want to clarify, are we talking about the section enrollment, the CC record start date, or are we talking about a student's entry date?
The enrollment date. So it would be the CC start.
Okay.
Now, to add to that, so like what you're saying there, it kind of relates to, again, another one of my points here is I would be absolutely anal about creating any new year records, like entering the new year, like the terms and everything like that, until I got 100% absolute confirmation from senior administration what the dates would be. Because I absolutely refused, after one time and having to fix it all, deal with changing dates. I said, you tell me what they're going to be, not what you think they're going to be. And it'll save you. It's a headache saver, really, because of all the records that are affected by that, all the data that's affected by that, and all the things you potentially will have to change if you don't have that date right. So that's another one is don't create your new year records, your school, your terms, everything, until someone who is above you, which they should be and will be, has officially confirmed, frankly, in writing, what these dates are going to be, because it's still going to be up to you to fix it, but at least you have in writing why you can be upset about it.
I mean, assuming that's an option, it's possible that your secretaries are not secretaries, but guidance counselors are bugging you to, hey, I need you to set up the next school year so I can start with Power Scheduler. Yeah. So sometimes you're just not going to be able to. So,
but you can do that in Power Scheduler, can't you?
Yes.
Because it's not really the new year. And so, right. I mean, there's still work if you have to change things.
Right. Yeah, that's where I was getting. But one thing I wanted to say, especially I wanted to bring it up just because in the era of COVID, one thing that we all kind of know about PowerSchool is when we're talking about attendance is, the only time an attendance record is created is if there's an actual attendance code attached to it. So present is
Yes.
fine. So in your scenario where, school started August 1st, you make a schedule change on August 3rd, and you put that entry date as August 1st, assuming that they're present because they're there to want a schedule change, right?
Yeah.
Is perfectly fine. You're not creating any attendance records. However, in the era of COVID, I do know some states are now requiring schools to basically use, I don't know about this school year particularly, but the last school year, use a specific code of, and I'm speaking for Indiana because that is where I'm from and it's what I'm familiar with. Whether you're in attendance or remote,
It's no longer implied that you're present. It has to be explicit that you're present.
exactly, and also what type of present you are. So in that scenario, if you're rolling back and putting in an entry date of before your current date, you want to make sure you update those attendance records as well.
Exactly. Well, we had already had to deal with some of that because, as I mentioned earlier, we started those 3 programs in the same year on our campus. One of them is virtual. And so for them, we switched from negative attendance, which is you only mark when they're absent or have a negative mark, to positive attendance. Because anytime, part of the requirement for our virtual school is that they have a face-to-face, in-person interaction with somebody once a week at least. And so they would mark a presence in there. As we move forward, that whole concept of having mentor contacts and such was something we had developed long before COVID hit. So when COVID hit and our districts were screaming for a way to figure out who was virtual or not,
you already kind of had it.
we already had it. I was able to add a secondary piece. Because we were tracking mentor contacts for state purposes to report to the state. In Michigan, they finally resolved down to you have to have a single 2-way communication or mentor contact each week in the count month. So starting from the Wednesday was count day, is October for us. And then each week from there, you had to have at least one of those 2-way communications, and you had to document it. And so we were able to document mentor contacts for that. Well, as we rolled into COVID, they were looking for something that was a slightly different bent than mentor contact. It would be a 1 or 2-way communication. And so again, I leveraged the log entries to create a 1 and 2-way radio button next to anytime they selected communication as their log type. And so there is a plugin that I have that's for mentor contact and 2-way communications that also has a whole report that you can run inside of the teacher portal that lets you see the students in your class, and for a 4-week period, have you put in that contact information. And then it just became a matter of getting the state to let us know, okay, beyond count day, what other attendance information do you want from us? Right. And so we were able to distribute this plugin throughout our local districts and everything and say, here, you can use this if you want to, or use the state provided one that was came through MBA, because they're our state person that does all the state stuff. You had created that 2-way communication piece as well. So, but the reporting for that became interesting because we had some districts that were still doing negative attendance, assuming present, and we had a lot though that had moved over to the positive attendance, where every day was marked, and so that definitely became a part of my late spring work, working with our pupil accountant to figure out those reports. And they got interesting. There were some pretty in-depth reports for that. So, but yeah, we were in a great position to help out our districts with that in COVID, because we were already tracking some of those things.
Doing something similar, sure.
Yeah.
So Eric, you've been a little quiet over there. Has anything come to mind, kind of based around start of year that you've seen over the years?
Well, there's one thing that's
wait.
Oh, sorry, Ryan.
No. I just want Eric to actually show me what on his shirt, and then
we
I'm
do
just curious what's below.
So, you want me to take my shirt off? You want to know what?
Yes.
Oh, read it to us.
I want.
So this T-shirt was a gift to me for any of our MBA clients out there that have done implementations with Cat Mukite. Cat, a dear friend of mine, gifted this shirt to me, and it's a definition of programmer. The definition is someone who develops or someone who solves a problem you didn't know you had in a way that you don't understand.
Awesome.
I mean, that really is one of the best definitions I've ever heard.
Yes.
That goes back to, I'm going to give you what you need, not what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly.
And then below that it says, see also wizard, magician.
Well, and citing what Peter just said, Batman. This is what we need.
No, it was kind of funny because this morning when I'm working remote today, but when I was telling my wife I'm going to go in the other room and work, I said, I'm off to be the wizard.
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. So she actually said the Wonderful Wizards of Oz and Oz. So I was like, that was a good follow-up.
It is, though, to folks that have never done development. It is what you said earlier, Peter, when someone looked at you and they're like, you did that thing? I mean, it's a lot of fun what we do. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, before I answer your question, Sean, because one thing does come to mind. You're just talking about a plugin that you built. Is that potentially something that you had shared on PowerSource as well, or is that something that's just for use within Kent ISD?
Oh, you mean the two-way communication?
Yeah.
I haven't shared it on PowerSource, but it is available if somebody wants it. And I've considered doing that. It's it's like most programmers from my day. We don't like to have to do documentation.
Right, right.
It requires
that's got to be understood on PowerSource.
Exactly. That was my first, when I originally submitted my first plugin, that was my real kind of, okay, now I got to go out, make it clear what has to be done and provide documentation and everything. Which, ultimately
the reason I asked that question is it just seems like that solution you described would be very repurposable.
Sure it is.
For different needs, and that's one thing that I think we talked about in our clever workarounds. Is taking something that's designed to do this,
yeah, totally,
and using it to do something else. So that's the reason I asked that, and I just encourage people to be familiar with what's out there and what's free on PowerSource and how you might use it creatively or for its intended purpose. And which
and frameworks.
Yeah, I was going to say I kind of did the PSCB reports model. I finally realized that instead of constantly making a new version that included one new feature or another, it requires my log entry management plugin plus that. And I also have another one that is with that the other thing that was asked for is when they're entering a mentor contact or two-way communication, maybe they had a Zoom session, right? The teacher said I had all my students in class. There is a way to select which students were in class and submit a single log entry for all of them. So it creates multiple log entries with that. So there's two more that stack on that. So
let's make sure so that our listeners are hearing, like, we're not selling anything. Peter's not selling anything. This is stuff he's graciously put out on the PowerSchool or PowerSource Exchange.
Yeah, and I can put it out there if it sounds like something they would like, then I'll consider putting it out there. We do have it available to our local districts on a Google Drive that we share with them. So,
and if you're interested in it, listeners, Peter's phone number is 555. Well, actually, Peter, that segues really well, and like the one thing that sticks out for me because I've seen it on the PSUG.io group, I've seen it internally come up just today, as a matter of fact, at MBA, and I think I might have seen it in one or two other spots as well. From a scheduling perspective, where do I have holes? What students aren't fully scheduled? I've seen it come up a couple times. And I think one of the answers I heard in both places, internally and on PSUG.io, is PSCB. Yeah. They've got some great scheduling reports, 100% free. I don't know exactly which one it is, but that will identify students with open periods or unscheduled periods. I guess there's. Wow, you look so dapper when you slowly remove your glasses like that. You've got this very intellectual look going on.
Got a professor look going on.
Yeah.
Okay,
then apparently, and I
really
didn't know
make
this.
a point. He just rips them off.
That's when he's angry. And then you gotta work on the putting them on too. Like, is it my CSI Miami, dude?
Yeah.
And sadly, I never knew there's actually a search you can do apparently from the home screen for students with an open period as well. But you have to search a specific period apparently. Anywho.
Yeah, there's a lot of little
I think making sure, your schedules are up to snuff early in the year, and also from that something that touches on something we talked about earlier. One of the reports that we offer for free at MBA, it's on our site, is a ADA ADM audit report. It's a free plugin that we offer, and it does some analysis on your school calendar and your students' FTEs and tracks to try to identify common problems that lead to inaccurate ADA ADM reporting. So I think getting that on your system and just taking a look at that stuff early in the year. Otherwise, I think what tends to happen is, when do you realize that you have a problem? It's when it's time to send report cards home, or it's time to submit this state report. And now it's become it's become a little bit of a panic. And have fun working till 9 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, I think the Power Tools, doesn't that also have some tools like that?
I'm not super familiar with Power Tools.
Is that one still updated?
The search term that you were talking about, Eric, is the * not _ enrolled _ in _ period. And then you can also use the * not _ enrolled _ in equals, and I do believe use a course number.
I think you can find that's one of those documents you can find on PowerSource that still references Apple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that old. Like, those codes all work and fine, and there's no reason for them to update it. But that's how far back those ones go. It's funny.
I was on a site just last week that I clicked on a link. I said, where did that link come from? And it took me to a Pinstripe page. I thought, I don't even think they use this anymore.
Yeah, right. But to piggyback on some of the stuff here that Eric's talking about, for me, like, so that ADA ADM audit, absolutely, and just the whole point of you saying, when do you usually find about things? Report cards, right? And then have fun staying up to 9 p.m. Because I've been there, and it sucks so much. And that's another one of my general tips is, do everything you can. Like, if you've been a PowerSchool administrator for over 1 year, you've got enough experiences to draw on that you don't want to relive. If it's your first year as a PowerSchool administrator, use the community, talk to people who know, because there's not much you can do to not run into these road bumps on the way. But after that first year, use that experience and do everything you can to catch these errors early, because migrating data from one section to another, and I'm not literally talking sections, although it does include sections, is a nuisance. That's a 9 p.m. thing, like you're saying. If you can catch enrollment errors, attendance errors, periods, things like that early on, yeah, you save yourself a lot of time and headaches.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say on top of that, and then furthermore, is the big thing I had is kind of adding on to everything I just said is at the beginning of the year, that's when you send out all those reminders. Even though a lot of the people will be like, oh, telling us again. Well, guess what? If you didn't tell them again, some of them would have forgotten. Yeah. And like a big huge one is at the beginning of the year, especially, sometimes you have kids that left your district for a year and they left in grade 3 in one elementary school. And then they came back in grade 5 into another elementary school. And so all you need to do is get school A to transfer that student to school B. But someone will inevitably create the new record and then skip the whole spiel that shows that you might be creating a duplicate. And you end up with 2 students with the same name because they're the same kid. And then someone says, hey, why can't we get these records with this record? Why can't we get his old attendance and his old grades showing with this one? Well, you could have if you just migrated properly in the first place.
Yeah,
so
if you just activated the existing student and updated.
Yeah. So
that happened before school started.
Yeah, those are the times to send out those reminders so that people don't create those problems that you're going to be on the hook to solve.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that.
I'll be quick. Sorry, we keep talking over one another. I'll be quick. I was just going to say, it's interesting too when you work with some of the different, like especially the dioceses that span kind of all over the place. So we work a lot with the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and they have that problem because they've got schools all over the state of Wisconsin. And for those kids that are bumping around, maybe they're in a whole new community, but they're still part of this overarching archdiocese. We've actually customized to shut them down unless they're in a particular security group. If we find a matching and they say, you need to go to, and maybe I'm not remembering the exact process, but we added customization to prevent those duplicate students.
So like the submit button won't work?
Right, exactly. Anyway, Peter, I'm going to quiet down now. Let you finish.
I was just going to say as Ryan was talking about that, it reminded me too is that's one of the other things for the start of the year is make sure you have training for your teachers. I'm very fortunate to be working with a good team of folks who know their stuff and have a couple of certified PowerSchool trainers on our team that do that. And they go out to our local districts and train teachers with the new look and everything. We've got somebody we hired recently who's put together tons of documentation on what the new, Power Teacher looks like and how to navigate that and work with all that, and then goes out and trains our teachers. So, that's a big part of the start of the year is to get the teachers on board. And if you can, and this is something we haven't done in a while because the people we had in these roles kind of moved on, but if you can get a teacher advocate for PowerSchool, kind of a teacher who knows PowerSchool really well, that you can have other teachers go to kind of get the ins and the outs, it can take a lot of calls to your desk off your table.
Or if you don't have one, someone that is willing and wanting to learn and be that person.
Correct. And then for us as customizers, that's the person we hopefully can go to and say, hey, is this working? Is this working for you guys on the teacher side the way you want it to? We had, for the first several years that I was working in PowerSchool, we had a great teacher for that. And she helped with a ton of testing and things, especially when I was first learning how to navigate PowerSchool and everything. It was a great help. So if you can find that person that's going to be that advocate on in the teacher's ranks, that's awesome. That really
I mean, that person also ends up becoming the person that you go to and say, hey, what are your pain points? I'm looking at the next project. What can I solve for you? A lot of these topics that we're talking about, especially the last couple, if we go back and look at our episodes that we did on, it's summertime, what do you do now? A lot of that we talked about in those episodes was preparing for now it's time to go. Now it's time to really put those plans in action. And training is definitely one of those huge ones that you want to put into action.
Yeah. Well, and then so like on that, so my former district, we had an awesome situation. This is not the teacher side of it was nothing to do with me setting it up. It was the curriculum side and education side that had this already in place, and they took advantage of it. But they had their lead, I forget the right term for it, but let's call it a lead tech teacher. It wasn't that called, like it wasn't meant to be like the IT person, but it was the teacher that integrated technology into the staff in the school. And my boss was an educator, by education, and then he was heading the department. And I was kind of a stickler with saying, like, if you need technical support with the gradebook and Power Teacher, I'm your man. But if you need any support with pedagogy and things like that, don't come to me because I can't do anything about that. I'm not a teacher, And
you need to know what your IP is. I got you.
Yeah, and he did. So then he did that, and then he would train those teachers and everything like that. But then on the flip side, I would, because I was strict in a way that I wanted to make sure that schools were set up and stuff and courses were set up in a certain way and whatever like that. But I also appreciated that I was asking a lot of attention to detail. So I pulled for days at the beginning of the year and at the end of the previous year where I would get all the secretaries into one room, into one lab in one school, where I would give them that a whole day without distractions. We would the district would pay for their subs so that the schools could still run and answer phones and whatnot, but so that they could work uninterrupted on getting their new year set up, and then have me right there in the room to answer questions when things weren't going right or they needed to clear something up. And so I mean it's that training part that is absolutely valuable to get everything going on both sides, administrative and education wise. So yeah, that's your biggest headache saver for a start of year to me.
Yeah, we've even in the past, depending on how many teachers we had in a school, we've gone to a local district and trained maybe 5 teachers out of the 60 they have to be not only the advocate, but then we're going to share documentation. You're the ones that are going to go ahead and share that out from there. So then you don't have to depend on all 60 of those teachers being there at one time. You can have those folks that are, that are going to be there. And, a lot of times, especially if they're a respected teacher, you get the other teachers willing to listen to them and understand, oh, this isn't a tech person talking to me. This is somebody that uses it day to day, that knows the ins and outs and can give me those, tips and tricks that we always love to have.
Absolutely. So, Peter, when you think of start of year, has there been any, customizations that you've developed over the years that really tackle a specific thing that was a pain point at the start of year?
Most of what we work with are reports. And I have the feeling that, if you went through, as we point out, PSCB and some of the built-in reports that are already there, but some of them that we ran into Michigan, we use what's called a UIC. It's a number that is a unique code for a student in Michigan. So if they go from district to district, that follows them. So, in PowerSchool, you can have different, student numbers, but that UIC goes with them. So, we've got some things that we've put in place originally as reports to say, hey, the student's missing a UIC or whatever. It brings up an idea that, I probably should put together a plugin for some of our locals that actually looks for students actively. Are you missing a UIC and reporting that out? Because it's required for anything interacting with state websites and everything. Michigan over the last half a dozen years or so has been developing a data hub that will allow any SIS to query information about a student in the state using their UIC. So whether they're working with PowerSchool or one of the other SISs, they'll be able to get it'll kind of like an API, go out, grab the data, and if a student gets enrolled into a PowerSchool district after having been in another, have a different SIS, if they've been a participating SIS and district, they can grab a lot of the demographic information straight from there and have it come right into PowerSchool directly, rather than having to go out to the MSDS website, which is Michigan's state's data for students, and getting that data and then hand putting it in or even importing it. They have a way now. They're building a way to say, using this UIC, go out and grab that data for us and bring it in. So the last several years, we've been pushing data into the system, and now last year, and now more so this year, they're getting it to the point now where from PowerSchool you can query that and say, hey, look up the student for me. What can you give me? And get a lot of the needed state settings for those students. So it's a great initiative that they've been doing here, and I think it's going to pay dividends quite a bit down the road. So that's one of the advantages that we've had with that. So that having missing data and not having that UIC, we're stuck. The other big point, and I think everybody's had this, right? Getting contact information, getting it into the system from the parents and everything else. There's so many different ways of doing it. Yep. We have a custom system that we developed for enrollment because we have students coming to us from our local districts. So none of the students, for the most part, up until we took on the center-based program, which is the special needs students. Before we took on that program, the only students that were our students weren't really our students, right? They all came from elsewhere. So they might have one or two courses in our day that they come. But once you added the virtual school and project-based school, we suddenly had students that could be coming in the morning for the project-based school. They could be taking an online virtual school through our virtual school. And at the same time, they could be taking one of our tech classes. They took a welding class they went in and did some welding for a project. So now they want to take a class in welding. Well, we call those our Trifecta students. They're in all three schools at one time. So we have to track those three, what schools they're in. So they start with an anchor school, right? The one that's the school ID for the student. Then each of the CC records gets associated with which school they're taking classes in. So it's like a remote school. Everybody knows of it as a remote school.
So you guys using like a remote enrollments for that?
Yeah. And then on top of that, then we have to know what district they came from. So we have to track that school. And if that school is in Michigan, we have the ability for students to go to other school districts. But the FTE needs to go back to the school district that they are living in. So it's the resident district. So
sounds like a state reporting nightmare.
It is. It is. And we're fortunate enough to have the president of the Michigan Student Pupil Accounting Association on our team. So,
nice.
Yeah, she's yeah, and so she gets all that information out to our local districts, and she doesn't. I sometimes she sits right behind me, and I think, oh my gosh, some of the stuff that she has to deal with, and the state being slow. We need these reports on this date, and the state hasn't even come out with the requirements yet. You get that.
Spoiled.
Yeah, it is. We really, when we first went to fill that role on our team, I thought, why do you need somebody to do that full time? It should be pretty straightforward. But once we hired her, I realized, oh,
not
no.
so much.
Yeah, because now we run the center-based program, so that has different accounting things for the special needs students there. We have the Great Start program, which is preschool and different. And then we have the different schools that are. So we actually have to track them in up to 5 different schools at once. And so it makes for some interesting things. But we talk about one of the neater customizations that I did that was really, really helpful was we would get these calls from our registrars or principals saying, hey, I have the student that I'm teaching, but I have to go over here to quick lookup or someplace else to see if they're in a remote school, and at the time, quick lookup wasn't tabbed. So, so part of that solution was to put a prefix on each of the session names to be, MS for my school and KT for KTC and KC for KC. So that helped a lot, right? But they still would be on a page and say, I need to store the grades for them, but I don't want to store all their grades. I need to store it for this school. And there's a whole lot of different things that we have to move around. And I realized one day, I said, well, wait a minute, I can tell you all the schools they're in quickly. And I reached out to the one person that was the surviving member of our predecessor on the team. There were two people, right, doing all this. And I said, where should I put that? She said, student detail line. I said, oh, perfect. So, it was one of those quick customizations. I put it on the detail line and looked it up, said, here's your anchor school. Then in parentheses, I listed each of the schools that they had classes in.
Very cool.
And within 15 minutes after putting that in production, I was getting emails from principals and registrars and everything. This is the best thing ever. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. All of these other huge customizations I made, it took me
and the thing that you did in 10 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah. Are you kidding me? But that's the nature of it, right?
That's how it is.
Yeah. So that was one of those things that just said how it's great to be appreciated, but sometimes you get appreciated in the backward way.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes back to, really having those communication lines with your staff, and sometimes they don't know what they want, and having that communication between them and thinking about it from a PowerSchool side of things is really the best way to go. Oh, I think this would be really useful for you. Let's do it and see how it works.
Yeah. And we have to make sure they have the right anchor school too.
Right.
If for some reason at the end of the year they had them in the wrong next school, they're in the wrong anchor school, so we have to, switch them out. So that is another thing for us that we have to make sure is in place at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. Make sure that, for instance, if you want to select classes at the end of the year, we make their next school be the school they want to select classes from.
Yeah,
that's available on the student side to select courses. But when rollover time comes, we have to make sure that they have the actual anchor school. And as I said, we have a precedence where we have this as the anchor school, and if they're in that school, these are the secondary. If they're not in that school, then one of those secondary ones becomes primary, potentially be secondary and such. So
sure.
We developed a lot of that at the start, and it's made all the difference for us to be able to do that. So having the remote schools, you always want to make sure the one that's their primary is there. But like I said, then when it comes time for reporting, we have to let our local districts know, these are the students you had with us. These are the courses they're taking. These are the ones, and it used to be that we wouldn't even tell them what credit they earned, because each school might be different, right?
Different.
They might have 3 credits for this algebra class, and the other one might be 4. But then they finally decided to say, hey, we want you to tell us what they earned. And so, okay, so now we're going to tell them that we had to go back and backfill all of the courses for what they earned, right? We didn't track that before.
Right.
So it brought up some interesting things. And then we also have, because our students are coming to us on a regular basis from outside, I customized the pages. Some of the early customizations I did that weren't plugins were the historical pages. So they could put historical grades in. And we needed to be able to have a way for them to enter in what school it was earned at, which is already built in. But we needed that to be consistent. So I customized it so it's a drop down, so they can select a district from a drop down and then be able to fill it in that way. And if it's another one, then they can just specify other and go that way. So,
Gotcha.
So those are the kind of things we have to deal with at the beginning of the year. And then also, though, one of the things that we did was when we get new students as well, we're very fortunate that there's been a ton of time and everything put into our data warehouse that we have housed at Kent ISD. And that data warehouse then is available to a lot of the other ISDs around us. We're kind of a consortium that they can use our ISD data warehouse. For all of our districts that are under us, they get to use it, for, whatever that cost is. But, they work out that cost stuff. I don't work with the accounting, right? But they have access to that.
Well,
when
and being in that position, allows you to do that, being an ISD rather than actually being in a specific district. So that's awesome.
Exactly. So when they send us a student, we don't have their test scores and things like that, except we do, because it's in our data warehouse. And so we set up a system to transfer that data out of the data warehouse. And then with the secondary step, I set up a customization that, based on what the file is that you selected off of our SFTP server, will determine which test you're loading. And then it'll automatically let you bring in SAT, SAT-8, whatever it is that you want to scores. So when we do that, the teachers, when they're evaluating, in particular for like a virtual school, if they're helping the student pick out their classes, they can know how they did in certain areas and be able to work with them as counselors. So we try to put as much information in front of the teachers and the counselors and people that are working with it, which again goes back to the accommodations, right? They want to be able to see that. And so we developed, again, a system. We want to make sure we have all the accommodations in our system so the teachers can see that. And so we developed, back when it was still TyNet, before they had actually integrated with PowerSchool, we had developed a process to bring data from what is now PowerSchool Special Programs into our system to see it, so that the teachers and people that were working with the students with a pop-up can see what accommodations they need to provide. And then we expanded that to be Section 504 accommodations. And I'm currently working on having that expanded into ELL accommodations. So,
very cool.
Yeah, so to put all that information in front of them has been great, but you need to make sure all that's in place. And we've been able to get processes in place to automatically do that. And like I said, with the team that we have here, I'm very, very blessed to have the people that I work with, because
Well, I'll tell you, it sounds like they're very blessed to have you as well.
Oh, appreciate that.
Well, hey guys, time flies when you're having fun. We're about up on time. Unless anybody has anything else to throw in, thank you very much, Peter, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Everybody out there, good luck with your start of year. If you want to imbibe in a little drink to get you through, nobody's going to judge you. All right, guys. Until next time.
I don't know that earlier thing about you guys having a competition and try out some drinks. I don't drink a lot, but I might be interested in finding out which one of you is a better bartender.
Oh, well, that
Eric
would be Sean,
because
Sean's an actual profession. I just want to throw. I did open another one, and I just love the can. It's a porter, Stranger Than Fiction. I don't know if the artwork actually comes through, but it's quite an enchanting can.
Oh,
that is lovely.
Is that like
Alice in
wildlife
Wonderlandish.
having a campfire?
Oh my goodness!
God bless you.
You must be allergic to rabbits.
Apparently. But yes, I just want to throw that one out there.
All right, guys. Peter, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Next time, everyone.
Thank you, Peter.
You guys take care.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Enjoy more episodes and learn more at mba-link.com.